Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Charles, and I welcome you guys to another episode of the Dreamerspro Show, where we cover everything from sports, hot topics, classic debates, entertainment, and where we give you guys a fresh perspective on things and how we see them. And in today's episode, the topic is, can the Clippers get back into this series in Game 3? So that's the topic I want to get into in today's video. But before we get into that, I want you guys to please make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell to be notified whenever we drop our content. Also, make sure you go ahead and check out Dreamerspro Max, an online sports community that we created, a place where you can go and start basketball discussions, chat live during games, and so many other cool things. So if you guys are interested in that, be sure to check that out. We have that linked in the description below and get 7 days of access. We will be chatting live during tonight's game. So if you want to access that, make sure you go ahead and sign up to Dreamerspro Max, and also make sure you go ahead and click the join button to join the channel to receive loyalty badges. Anyway, so let me get into this topic here. So finally, today's Game 3. We're finally going to get to watch Game 3, and I'm very excited about it. Now, quick thing. Some people are wondering, why aren't we seeing a live today? Because today is my sister's graduation, so I won't be able to do a live today. So I said, let me just do a preview for this game, and we do a video instead of a live. So at least we get out our thoughts before we go into this. So that's the reason you're not seeing a live today. So anyway, wanted to get that out the way. So let's get back into this series. So going into this series, I picked the Clippers to win this series in 7 games. I felt like it was going to be a very long series because I knew that the Utah Jazz are a very, very tough team to beat. I respect the opponent in this particular case, especially after last round. And, funny enough, in the first round, I thought the Clippers were going to beat the Mavs in 6 games. So I don't think it should be any surprise to some people that the Clippers are going to go, that I picked them to go 7. Now, can the Clippers beat the Mavs? Beat the Utah Jazz in 6? Well, absolutely. You can just build momentum, right? I saw Kawhi Leonard do it 2 years ago. Like this is nothing new. I think people throw out a lot of these stats. They will be the first team to do that. I think people just throw that out because they just want to feel like, okay, I came up with a good stat that nobody else thought of. 2 years ago, the Toronto Raptors lost to the number 1 seed in the NBA, and the Milwaukee Bucks. I think they had the best record in the NBA. They lost the first 2 games on the road. They came home, won Game 3 in overtime, then they won Game 4, and then they went on to win the next 2 games in a row. So they beat them 4 games in a row. So this is nothing new or anything like that. I think a lot of people, after the content we published yesterday, probably people, you jumped off the bandwagon. First of all, I said at the end of both of those videos that I still picked the Clippers in 7 games. However, I thought it was going to be a tough series. What I was saying, and I think what I should be afforded, is the opportunity to express my thoughts. I've seen Skibellis come out there and say the Clippers are a frustrating team, but he still supports them. So I should have the right to express my thoughts in that moment. And if I express my thoughts in that moment, it doesn't mean that, I've given up on a team. It means I'm telling you how I felt in that moment, and I think I should have the right to do that, right? If people want an honest take, I gave it to you. So I think no. I said what I thought in that moment, and I expressed, my disappointment in some things that I was seeing on the court. In one of the videos, I spoke about Paul George. Now, some people felt like because I spoke about Paul George in the way that I did, they felt like I was somehow kind of omitting Kawhi Leonard from any of the blame. Here's the point. The Clippers wouldn't even be in round 2 if it wasn't if it wasn't for Kawhi Leonard. That's the first thing. The second thing, has Kawhi Leonard played up to his level in the first 2 games? No. The point is this, though. When you have a co-star, when one of your players don't play well, you would hope that the other one would pick up the slack. Otherwise, what is the purpose of having a co-star that can't pick up the slack whenever you're off? Unless you're telling me that the best player can never have an off night. That's absurd. Even LeBron, when he was making his run to the finals last year, AD had some big monster games. You remember the game winning 3 he hit in game 3 or game 2 against the Denver Nuggets? Like, your co-star is supposed to pick up the load in certain points. So some people saying, Kawhi, you got to look at Kawhi. No, you don't have to look at Kawhi. You can only look at Kawhi in the terms of, okay, can Kawhi get back to the Kawhi he's been? Well, I have no doubt about that. But when you have a co-star, your co-star should be able to pick up the slack when you don't. You can have a scenario where your best player plays bad and your second best player is always playing like bad. Like that can't be the case. So when people are looking at Kawhi, first of all, Kawhi's been averaging 30 points per game in the playoffs. Y'all know Kawhi Leonard is shooting about 57%, 58% in the playoffs. For the playoffs, somebody said, well, he shot less than 50% last year. How many players that are perimeter players do you know that shoot over 50%? How many? Like, when people say these things, I'm like, okay, who are the other players? You have Kevin Durant, and that's it. Who's the other player? Chris Middleton? But you see how, look at Chris Middleton. You want to put Chris Middleton in the same classroom as Kawhi Leonard? No. So when people say he shot 47%, he shot 47%. How many players shot 47%? So I think some people need to just kind of relax. I expect great things from Kawhi Leonard because he's always delivered that. People are like, but how is Kawhi Leonard getting admitted? Because Kawhi Leonard has delivered so many times in the playoffs, it's not even funny. So nobody's going to look at Kawhi because they're going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Paul George, on the other hand, no one is going to give him that benefit of the doubt because he hasn't delivered on that level. That's the first thing. Second thing, let me just quickly say this. Some people say, oh, you're turning on Paul George. Stop. Like, there's a lot of people that are maybe latecomers. There's a lot of people out there I've noticed that they I don't know who these people are. I don't know how they work, but what they do is they sit there and they point fingers at people and they're very accusatory. You guys are the people that are doing that. Mean like as if and you don't know who these people are. They have the luxury of sitting behind a computer and or their phone and criticizing everyone on the internet. That's their talent, right? Some people, you're creating a scenario where Paul George can be criticized. It's like, are you high? I've been defending Paul George for 2 years. 2 years. Where have you been? Mr. I just came and saw a video, and then all of a sudden you want to summarize someone into like, oh, this is the guy. No, I've been defending Paul George for 2 years. So many people were going at Paul George, and I defended him. So please, spare me with your late indignation of, this guy, like, go somewhere with that. Nobody's taking you seriously, and I'm not gonna let you just sit up here and just say whatever you want to say. So Paul George needs to show up, and I'm gonna get into the game real quick, but let's think about Kawhi Leonard. I expect Kawhi Leonard to show up. He needs to play better, but let me tell you something. The Clippers wouldn't even be in round 2. Okay, I'm being critical of Paul George because Paul George has not even had one game in these playoffs where he scored at least 30 points. Not even one time. And let me just say this. I was wrong. Let me admit this publicly. I was wrong. Donovan Mitchell is better than Paul George. You know why? Because Donovan Mitchell, the thing between his ears, his mental approach, it's all mentality at this point because everybody can play basketball. Donovan Mitchell and Paul George are both very talented. They both can play basketball. I think the fundamental difference between Donovan Mitchell and Paul George is their mental approach. Donovan Mitchell is just a mentally tougher guy than Paul George and much more aggressive. I see a lot more dog in him than I see in PG. So Paul George has not even had one 30-point game in the playoffs. One. That's absurd for a $200 million guy, an all-NBA performer, to not even have one 30-point game in 9 games. Kawhi Leonard has already had 2 40-point games, multiple 30-point games. So what exactly are we talking about when people are like, we got to look in the direction of Kawhi Leonard? No, you really don't. Because you can be rest assured that Kawhi Leonard is going to show up. Can you say the same thing about Paul George? He has not shown it yet. That's the reason I've been so critical of him. He needs to show up. He needs to help pick up the slack, right? He needs to help it. Like, you got to play, but you got to play better. Stop looking so indecisive. Stop looking like you have no confidence in your shot. Like, Paul George doesn't look confident out there. And this is not the time that you need to start doubting yourself. You had the whole season to kind of work through all of and exercise all of these demons. You get into the playoffs. This is game 3. He needs to show up. And I just wanted to say that, given the fact that we're not doing a live, but this is exactly what I would say on a live. So let me just get that out of the way. I also said that, listen, this Utah Jazz team is a tougher team than the Dallas Mavericks. However, I feel like this Utah Jazz team is very beatable. I've seen the Clippers play with them. They've been right there with them in both of these games, right? They just haven't been able to execute down the stretch. Now, the Jazz are very talented. They're well coached. They play with a lot of intensity. This is something that I said going into the playoffs. I said they're going to blitz you when they come out of the gate, and they blitz you all game long. They're going to get in your airspace. They're going to crowd your space. They're going to shoot a lot of threes. They're going to make a lot of threes. These are things that we all said. That I said going into the playoffs, and they've done exactly that, and they come at you in waves. You saw the Clippers in game 2. They were able to go up by 1, but from when Reggie Jackson had that personal 6-0 run, let me just say this. Reggie Jackson has been sensational. And I apologize to Reggie. He has been sensational. I got to give credit where it's due. Reggie's played very, very well, and I'm very impressed with the way he played. But after they went up by 1, the guy comes back and hits a tough 3. It almost seemed like that game 2 was meant to be, with that high shot that he hit off the top of the backboard and the bank 3. There's nothing you can do with that, right? Those are just luck shots, right? But the Clippers showed me that they were right there and they could execute. Down the stretch, they had wide open shots. They were down 5 and they missed a bunch of open shots from Marcus Morris Sr., who I've been disappointed in. And I hope Marcus Morris Sr. plays better because he's going to need to play better. But the Clippers in every single game have had the opportunity to beat the Utah Jazz handily. In every game they've played in, they've had the opportunity to beat them. They just haven't been able to execute and make shots at the end, going down the stretch. But they could have won both of those games. You're down 20. Was it 20? Is it 21 points or 19 points in the third quarter to a team at home, and you come back and take the lead? No. The Clippers could have won that game. They just weren't able to hold on at the end. I think Kawhi Leonard needs to step up. I expected him to score 30 plus in that last game. He didn't. This game, he needs to do it. Kawhi Leonard you need to be able to pencil in what he's going to deliver. So Kawhi Leonard needs to step up and play he needs to we need another one of those games from him, because we've reached the moments when where, it's critical, and the Kawhi Leonard needs to show up. So he needs to have a huge game tonight. Right, it just needs to happen. There's just no two ways about it. I believe if Kawhi Leonard played a little bit better, if Kawhi Leonard and Paul George played a little bit better, this series would at least be 1-1. Now, some people go back to Paul George for a second, but Paul George had 27. The last points he scored at the end don't matter. That three, it didn't matter at that point. We're talking about being efficient early in the game. If you look at Paul George, he wasn't efficient early in the game. You make a few shots here and there. Even Deuce Sedan, one of the members on Dreamerspro Max, one of our biggest supporters, he's a huge Paul George fan. He's like, if only Paul George was making more shots. That's what we're asking. A little bit more efficiency, a little bit more consistency, right? That's what I wanted to say. Now, going into today's game, as I said, Kawhi Leonard needs to play a lot better. Paul George needs to step up. Marcus Morris Sr. needs to step up. The Clippers need to play great defense for 48 minutes. 48 minutes, they need to play great defense for 48 minutes. They have to limit a lot of those mental lapses, those careless turnovers. You heard one of the analysts on ESPN talking about the Clippers at certain times look nonchalant in a playoff game. They got to clean up a lot of those things, but this is just their habit. This is the team. This is who they are. So they have to limit a lot of those mental errors. They just need to limit them, because against this team, they'll make you pay. They must make shots. Ladies and gentlemen, the Clippers need to make shots. They need to make shots. It's just that simple. So, to win a game, ultimately, it's who has the most points, right? Whoever has the most points wins the game. And for you to have the most points, you need to make some shots. It's not just about playing defense. If you play defense and on the other hand, you get stops, but you don't come down there and make, hit shots, it means nothing. I think at one point in the fourth quarter, Clippers missed nine straight shots. At that point, what does it have to do with your defense? It has nothing to do with defense. You got to make your shots. So Marcus Morris Sr., Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, these guys need to make shots. Like, it's just that simple. You got to score. You got to put the ball in the bucket. So I need more from Kawhi Leonard, from Paul George, and Marcus Morris Sr. Marcus Morris Sr. can be big. He's had multiple 20-point games in these playoffs. I need a big game from him. Because missing open shots, missing bunnies hurts the team. When you miss shots, it doesn't help your team, especially against this team. Because why? When Reggie Jackson hit that three to go up by 1, they came back and hit a 3. So they go up by 2. You need to now go back and make a shot. You can't just have empty possessions. You can't. Because your defensive efforts go to waste when you get a stop and you don't make a shot, right? So they need to make shots in this game. It's just that simple. They need to do a better job in guarding Donovan Mitchell, and they need to commit to a particular game plan. I saw in game 2 that they did different things. At one point, they played him they were dropping back on a lot of those pick and rolls. They weren't really guarding him very hard. He was able to get loose on a lot of those threes. If you look at Donovan Mitchell's offense, a lot of it is being generated from the 3-point line and off of those screens, right? They need to commit. And Ty Lue said, you need to take more defense. You need to take more pride in playing some man-to-man defense. That's something that the Clippers definitely need to do. They need to take more pride on the defensive end of the floor. I like the fact that in the second half that they went to the 3-2 zone, threw them out of a rhythm, and they were able to kind of get back in the game. But then again, they weren't able to close the deal. So they need to do a much better job on Donovan Mitchell. He can't have one of those 35-point games again. If he has a 35-point game, you need to make him take 30 shots to get 35 points. I saw the Clippers make Luka Doncic. He scored 42 points on 37 shots. You live with that. you'll live with that, right? But you can't have Donovan Mitchell scoring 40 off of 25 shots. That can't happen. So they need to do a much better job on guarding Donovan Mitchell because he's the head of the snake. Now, they do have some talented other players like Jordan Clarkson, Bogdanovich, Ingles, these guys who can make plays, pass the ball, score, attack. So Utah's tough because you need to play great team defense on all of these guys because one guy can hurt you, as you saw. Donovan Mitchell was limited in that second half. I think he only scored 3 points in the second half on the fourth quarter, if I'm not mistaken. But Joe Ingles and Jordan Clarkson and these guys, they got hot. And they were able to come back and hurt the Clippers. So, as I said, the Utah Jazz are a very tough team. And you got to account for everybody on the court. You got to beat them. But it's the same issue that the Utah Jazz are going to have with the Clippers. Because the Clippers have multiple guys that can hurt you. In game 1, you saw Luke Kennard come off the bench, give you some great points. I think he had like 11 points in the first half. Then in game 2, you saw this guy, what's his name? Reggie Jackson scored a lot of points. The Clippers have a lot of talented players. Marcus Morris Sr. can get you 20. Reggie Jackson can get you 20. Nicholas Batum can get you 15. You got Kawhi Leonard that can get you 40. Paul George can get you 25 to 30. So they have a lot of players that can go out there and hurt you too. So the Utah Jazz have the same problem. Right, they said they have the same issue, but Utah has a much better balanced attack. I think in game 2 they had 5 or 6 players in at least double digits in scoring. Clippers only had 3. It was Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and Reggie Jackson. Marcus Morris Sr. All these guys didn't show up. You know, Patrick Beverley was out there missing open threes and layups and all of these different things. So, you know, they just got to play better overall. They got to play better team defense. And here's what I think. I think the Clippers are going to win game 3. I think they're going to win game 3. And I think if they win game 3, what that does is it kind of it halts the momentum of the Utah Jazz. You win game 3, things kind of settle down a little bit. You win game 4, then you've completely neutralized their momentum, right? And all of the pressure shifts over to the Utah Jazz because now if the Clippers are able to split these next 2 games, then the Utah Jazz going back to Utah for game 5, possibly, if the series is tied 2-2, a lot of the pressure is going to be on Utah because now they have to guard home court. You don't want to give up that 5th game at home. Because if you give up that 5th game at home, then you can definitely come back and win game 6. So game 3 is pivotal, right? The Clippers need to focus on game 3 and only game 3. If they win game 3 and then you know, they can kind of like pause momentum and show themselves, okay, we can beat this team, is going to put a little bit of doubt in the Utah Jazz's mind. And they're going to be confident, but they're going to say, okay, we just lost to them, right? And it's going to be like, they're going to be scrambling in game 4 because they want to get game 4. If they beat them in game 4, you got yourself a series. So game 3 is pivotal. They need to win game 3. And I think if they win game 3, they're going to be on their way to getting back into this series again. I feel that this series is going to go 7, and game 7 is going to be a nail biter if they get to game 7. But I think game 3 is a must win, and I think they will win because if they don't win, series is over. It's just that simple. You go down 0-3. No team has ever come back from being down 0-3. So it's going to be a very important game. But players that need to show up. Kawhi Leonard, and this let me put it in order. Kawhi Leonard needs to show up, yes, because he's the best player on the court. So best player on the court and best player on the Clippers, so he needs to show up. Paul George needs to show up. Paul George needs to show up. You need to show up. I don't care what anybody says. You need to show up. Paul George is yet to have at least a 30-point game in the playoffs. Are you telling me Paul George can't have a 30-point game in the playoffs? Oh, is this what I'm being told here? Are you telling me Paul George and Kawhi can't go for 30 plus? They need to be able to do it. This guy, Chris Middleton, and these guys, and Giannis almost did it the other night. So listen, Paul George needs to show up. He needs to help Kawhi Leonard. He needs to help his teammate. If Paul George is hot, it makes the Clippers that much harder to guard because once Paul George does finally get hot, he is unguardable. There's no one in the entire world that can guard PG when he's rolling. So Paul George needs to get going. Marcus Morris Sr. needs to knock down some shots. He just needs to. You're the number 2 3-point shooter in the NBA last season. You can't be going 0-ers. You can't be going 1 of 8, 0 of 6. Like that, you don't help your team. They need to make shots. And I expect these 3 players to really, really step up. I think Ty Lue is going to make the necessary adjustments that he needs to make. Usually in the first 2 games of the series, he's picking who he thinks is going to work well in the series. That's what he did in round 1. So I think Ty Lue and his coaching staff are going to be fine, but you're not going to blame Ty Lue for players missing wide open shots. We're not going to do that. These guys need to show up and show up in a major way. in my opinion. And these are the things that I think need to happen. And I think the Clippers are going to win game 3, but it's going to be a tough one. But it's definitely doable. So those are my thoughts. So what I want to know from you guys is, what do you think about everything that I just said? What do you think is going to happen tonight? What do you think is what do you think is going to be the result of this game tonight? Whatever you guys think, please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. Again, if you enjoy the video, be sure to make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell to be notified whenever we drop our content. Once again, this is Charles here from Dreamerspro. Wishing you guys an amazing day and catch you guys on the next episode.